I don't want to repeat too much of what I've said in the past if I get a subtle hint that I have talked about it before. And I'm pretty sure I've talked about how a mental illness diagnosis could be another spiritual path. There are many spiritual paths. And it would be cool to write a book about that at some point, maybe, or perhaps only talking about it on video, I don't know. But I also had an insight about how we're getting turned into diseases and diagnoses because we're not taught or facilitated to step into what we came here to do. So we get mechanized into the machine of economy and consumerism, and then that consumes us, and we end up with these diseases and diagnoses. And then a lot of times our families or parents are afraid for us. But really, we're not able to communicate what is going on inside of us or anything. So then the only way we can communicate is by having some kind of disease or diagnosis to be focused on. Because, well, I don't want to say because, but so instead of someone taking notes on my symptoms, what I'm seeing, which is turned into a hallucination, if one, say, was talking to someone who was going to help someone write a book, that other person, that professional, would be taking notes on the more that the brain could see in order to help share it. So it's interesting because oftentimes in these visionary states of consciousness, or whatever the heck you want to call them, one can see more, and one doesn't know how to translate it to the linear realm, to the realm of things unfolding in space and time, seemingly sequentially. So then to reconnect with that seeming sequential unfolding of things in space and time, one is talking to someone who's able to linearize it, but what they're doing is translating it into symptoms of one's mental illness as opposed to what it really is, which is being able to see the totality and the whole, and how we're all interconnected. So then we re-interconnect by connecting with like a mental health system. And then we need to believe that we're mentally ill in order to continue to function in that reality. And that's part of what scares me a little bit, is that the less I believe in like this mental illness, I'm wondering if I'm like putting myself in danger from exiting linear reality, because if I think of it as something else, then I might go to that other something else type world, which may include something totally different that other people can't see, hence I won't be there. So that's where it gets a bit scary, and that's where one is willing to sort of drug and poison and tranquilize the brain to make it sort of slow down and reattach with linear perception. So that's when I think, well, it might be better to forget all these insights, forget everything that I think I might be able to see and talk about, and just go be linear in some menial existence and find joy in that. And perhaps that's the only way. Like, I don't know. Because if I think, whoa, I'm going to share something and help people see things differently, people don't want to see things differently. So I don't know if there's a point in that. And symptoms equal there is more that you can't see, aka the one who's seeing symptoms, in another. There is a music playing that you can't hear. There is a different rhythm. But when the other person can't see that, one meets as this person has symptoms and this person is normal, and perhaps it's a helpful process to help bring that person back down to normal, or they'll likely disappear into the light. And if one hasn't done that yet, then it's not time. So I was thinking about too how if one could learn to reestablish and maintain one's own boundaries, like put up boundaries on purpose intentionally, not as the ego that is a boundary that's there unintentionally, and then we react based on those patterns and we just think that's our personality. Could we create boundaries somehow? So I talked about the possibility of supplements creating some boundaries. Maybe also seeing what is coming out from the other. One can acknowledge it, but then not take it on, and that could be a way of putting up boundaries. There could be a way of doing that, putting up boundaries by seeing clearly. Whereas right now I'm feeling like seeing clearly just makes one a passive absorber of everything that's coming in this direction by virtue of whatever situation is happening. So I really don't know. And I'm wondering if this is where technology can help us, such as this heart math device, possibly. And it is possible that I am going to need to drug myself with more psychopharmaceuticals in the near future. And I'm wondering if when we have no boundaries, we need to be in beauty. Or at least now we need to. I'm not sure. Maybe I'll go away next weekend if this is still feeling really intense. And I'm just wondering if my environment isn't coherent with being boundaryless or boundless. And I was also thinking in terms of being a highly sensitive person, or some people are said to have multiple chemical sensitivities. Well, I made up a new thing about multiple human sensitivities. So perhaps some beings who are boundless and vulnerable are sensitive to certain types of human beings who have certain patterns of thought, or have certain morphogenetic fields, or who have certain attractor patterns, and have certain ego types, right? Maybe. Because when one is really empty and vulnerable, one can get situated into those patterns by that. And then I can see why some people really avoid people, because we pick up on it and we speak it out sometimes as we are boundless. So some of the people that are displaying the most bizarre behavior are picking up on the attractor patterns of and the morphogenetic field of other people, their DNA and what it's sort of radiating through past generations, and then reenacting those things out. So like, how do we heal from what is vibrating from our DNA? I really don't know. So we're kind of speakers of the truth of what is operating, but then it's seen as the other person's behavior and not really as these different situations happening based on all of humanity, all of one's past, all of one's fate, destiny, blah, blah, everything unfolding and folding back up. So like maybe some people are sensitive to violent patterns in others, and then, you know, some people have a tendency to be like, get violence against them or something, but that could be patterns of the past. And I really don't know. I'm just sort of talking and making stuff up from what I've written down. And I'm wondering if I'm sort of living in the morphogenetic field of fear because of how society is designed in a fear-based way. So being sensitive, eventually that all that accumulation of fear will like spill over, and it'll have an effect on my epigenetic matrix, and I'll start perceiving and acting based on fear. And I don't know if there's anything I can do about that, especially because I've spent some time sort of going on the upward trend, and now seems like I'm decelerating, or I could still be accelerating, but now it's getting to be too much. And so that's why I'll probably try the branched chain amino acids just to see what effect they have on me. Perhaps if I had the D-serine, I would take some of that, because this feels kind of like, not like psychosis. Like, the thing is, last time it was less psychosis and more like past trauma and processing that. So probably have to process more past trauma, and unfortunately that usually re-traumatizes some beings around me because they play into that energy. So I'm wondering if this time I can pretend I'm okay, like I'm pretending I'm okay now, but when it clicks over into major crisis, can I still like pretend I'm okay to the degree that they believe that I'm okay? Because then that way they're not going to change their behavior and start playing into some of these fearful patterns that are coming out of my heart. And I wondered, what is the best way to set up boundaries? And then I made a little acronym for BEST, which is boundless energy, space, time. So we sort of realized we're this boundless energy, but how do we sort of bring that into the whole space-time realm that people believe is like a linear thing? So for boundless energy, that's like non-linear. But then how do we bring that into space-time, which is linear? And maybe some of the ways that we do that is by reenacting some of these old patterns as dramas with those around us, to sort of bring it into space-time and material realm by like acting some of these things out. And that's where I feel that this family constellation thing could be helpful for me to sort of get those things out of my system, so then my family doesn't have to reenact that crap with me or whoever's around. And wondering also, a way for these boundaries is to move away from those things. So since we're vulnerable and sensitive, sometimes we can get sort of convinced to play into things because, oh, we don't have any boundaries, it's okay, everything's acceptable. But there could be a way to see the danger and move away from it and negate it right away. So just because we don't feel we have boundaries and we're related to everything doesn't mean we have to participate in everything that seems to come into our perceptual field and our epigenetic matrix. A gesture could just be to turn and walk away. And so, yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. And also, it's not your mental illness, but humanity's belief, and not just belief, but actually operating as separate ego entities. This denies intelligence that would make us like an intelligent swarm of ants. Can we go from the harm of separation, separate ego selves, to a swarm of intelligence? Because when we're separate egos, we only have relative intelligence, or we have this mechanized intelligence that translates things in terms of past patterns, and it's not seeing what is happening now. And so it's interesting because I'm just having an insight into this, and I have no idea if it's true, but when there's a being in the situation that is seeing what is happening now, and then another being who is operating based on past patterns, the being who's seeing what is happening now could actually inadvertently be opening up past patterns even beyond that other individual, because they can see what's happening. So they can fully see these past patterns, and then they see these dramas playing out, and then they almost have to play into them because the being they're looking at is operating in the past. So then one sees these dramas of the past in that person. It could happen differently too. It could be that the being that's in the present is able to bring the other being into the present. I feel like that's what's somewhat happening in so-called higher states, so-called mania. One is bringing somebody else into a different experience of themselves that they may or may not be aware of because of that energy. But then perhaps that is when the same vulnerable being who was in a state like mania starts to come down, then now we're not bringing out this new side in a being that might interact with us. We're bringing out all these past patterns in the being around us, and then we have to play in those dramas. And well, I don't know if we have to. Maybe that's another way to set up the boundaries when the drama starts happening. One just sort of says, no thanks. I don't know. And then I got onto a bit of a different topic, which was related to how when we go in these crisis states, we need 24-hour support. And there's not many places, there's only a few places in the world that'll give 24-hour support and not use medication as a first line of stopping the crisis from happening, but be with someone and allow them to move through it. And then it's really, really expensive, and there are very few. But what if we could learn our own spiritual emergence first aid? So if I'm in a spiritual emergence or emergency, I'm the first responder because I'm there with myself. But usually I don't know what to do, or oftentimes I don't. So I might call 911 for help. It feels like an emergency. So if I'm first on the scene, there are things that I can do to help myself. And just like if I cut my arm, if in the past I had learned to stitch up my own wound, I could stitch up my own wound if I had the supplies and the skill. But most of the time I realize, well, I don't have to learn to stitch up my own wound because there are people, if I call for help, emergency, they'll stitch up my wound. Now, there are also people who will stitch up the wound in consciousness in a spiritual emergence, but they're going to do it with the medical paradigm. And that's not the greatest way, per se. It does a lot more harm sometimes, or often it does. So what skills and things do I need to have in order to be able to get through a spiritual emergence on my own? Because even if I'm someone who wants to do it on my own and then have a supporter, most people don't have time to agree to be my 24-hour support for the next 3 days or 3 weeks or 3 months or however long it takes. So knowing that, I'm again left with myself. And that's why I've done things like sign up for online groceries and get certain supplements and things in my presence. And hopefully I'll get some of these other biofeedback devices soon too, so I can record some of the data of this and learn how to stitch up my own wounds, just like I could stitch up my arm if I learned how to do that. But there could be some wounds that I just can't stitch up on my own, like it'd be very hard to stitch up a wound on my back or something like that. And there could be equivalents to that in spiritual emergence. But there could be a lot that we can learn to do ourselves. And I don't know, but that's something I'm sort of exploring. So before, at previous times, I was exploring different ways to hopefully stop the crisis from ever happening again. And now I'm sort of wondering, well, there's going to be this reemergence of it, so how can I take care of my own wounds? Because if I don't, Other people who are trained in different ways are going to take care of those wounds in the ways that they know how, which could be anything. It could be meds. It could be something like ECT. And so I'm wondering if I can create my own emergence room, kind of synonymous with an emergency room, to be able to do everything for myself. And I pretty much have almost everything I need to do most things for myself here. The trouble is there are other beings around who might want to play into some of the awful states of consciousness I'm experiencing, that if I was alone by myself would be easier to process, not putting other people in my morphogenetic field. Like, I talk about other people's morphogenetic field perhaps leading to this state, but it's happened 5 or 6 times in the last 7 years, no matter what's happening. So take responsibility. People are coming into my morphogenetic field, and then they're having to, unfortunately, say things to me that I don't want to hear, or play out dramas that are kind of painful and might be replaying from generations of my family I don't even know about. It's so weird. Like, I don't even know. Since learning about the family constellation therapy, I've had a few insights into, like, wow, some of the things that played out through the last few months. It's like, whose was that? Whose was that in generations past? So, and it's old dead stuff. And it's perhaps by replaying the drama now, it can die for real and not again come into play, come into the past, come into affecting the present moment, and then playing out dramas of the past instead of perceiving and being in the moment. I really don't know. If this crisis comes early and I realize that it was a mistake to be in this location, then, it could be not good at all. But hopefully I can stay calm with some of the relaxation training I've been doing and things like that. It's hard to say. Perhaps if I say, well, I'm experiencing a little bit of distress right now, like I was thinking about getting more employment, like that's what people seem to care about, is employment and things. But now I'm feeling distressed, so it's sort of hard and blah, blah, but I don't know. So I'm wondering if one can create oneness or boundless energy CPR. Create safety until we become rebound to the body in space and time. But that might be a clue too, that for me, even entertaining these insights right now could be something that isn't coherent with this body right now. What could be more coherent with this body right now is being out for a walk in nature. Body in present space, time, in nature. So starting tomorrow, since it's going to be even nicer than today, and I had a bit of stuff to do today, I need to make that my first priority, is getting outside. And I don't know if that will help to mitigate some of this, but as I'm talking to myself about these insights, I'm having insights into what I could possibly do. And I also wrote down that I had an insight into why extreme eating plans could be helpful in setting up boundaries. Now, this seems like totally unrelated, right? But when my brain is in this state, I can see possibly important, significant, meaningful relationships between things that are quite far apart in obvious relationships. So, for example, why extreme eating plans could be helpful. Well, for me, I have in the past been a raw vegan, whole food, plant-based person. Now, if I decided to do that, doing that lifestyle actually creates a physical boundary between myself and other people who aren't living that lifestyle. So if I do that lifestyle, I'll naturally spend more time making food and eating by myself, eating high vibration food, vibrating at a higher level, which keeps lower vibrations away sometimes. So like right now, if I'm not able to keep my vibration up and it's sort of going down, if I ate super high vibration food, it's possible that my vibration would stay up. Plus, I'll be less apt to dine with people who are drinking and not eating good food. So that keeps me away from that type of morphogenetic field where there's this energy of chaotic eating lifestyles, eating for like pleasure and not for nourishment. And pleasure creates all sorts of trouble. So this creates a boundary in form in that it informs me to, I'll just naturally do my own thing in that lifestyle and not be so much with other physical entities who are not doing that. And I'll be fine with it because I'll be happy and vibrating at a high level. So it could create a physical boundary in that actions are different, and it could also be that vibrations are different enough to not have that in life so much. And it could also be that the cells of the body are very happy. So I'm reading this book called Deep Happy because I got it really cheap on Amazon when I was trying to top up my order to get free shipping. And there were a couple lines in there that really resonated in terms of how happiness is a body experience. Like happiness of the cells of the body. So perhaps if the cells of the body are happy, then we're naturally happy. Versus making happy into some kind of mental movement or needing of external things. And so that resonates with a lot of things on a lot of different levels. So again, that's where that whole raw vegan thing could come in as well. But I do like that idea of it sort of sets one apart from the mainstream if one is doing some kind of high vibration eating lifestyle and creates a natural boundary without trying to like put up these mental boundaries or have to have some kind of ego personality pattern to have boundaries, which is only reenacting patterns of the past which aren't there. Whereas eating a high vibration diet would lead to one vibrating higher and being in a different world than people who aren't doing that. Kind of like a different tribe in the world. So yeah, there was a time in my life when I spent a lot of time around like raw vegan-y type people, and I was quite happy. My body was quite happy for a long period of time. So I don't know. I don't think, again, there's causation like, oh, eating raw food diet's going to cure anything, but it might help with creating some kind of boundary. It could also make one too high. Like I was raw vegan before I was diagnosed, so who knows? I don't know what's right. I just had an insight into the possibility of how certain diet styles and certain lifestyles are a boundary. So if I decided to take street drugs and live on the street, that's a different lifestyle that's going to put me in different morphogenetic fields with different things happening to me according to that level of resonance. So yeah, raw veganism could do that a little bit as well and create this boundary in that one is doing something in material actuality, eating a certain lifestyle that very few are doing. So it sort of puts one up in this reality with very few based on a physical thing, not some kind of conceptual belief or like thought pattern or ideal, but just an actuality of nourishing the body fully. So I might experiment with that again at some point. Based on what I just said, I should think, oh, I should just switch now. But I am doing quite well in terms of food. I'm doing the beans or lentils, like pretty healthy canned organic lentils with low sodium, with broccoli and different things. So it is also said that eating certain ways can be more grounding. So raw vegan plant-based can be less grounding, and one could be vibrating too high, have too much energy, and then maybe have trouble sleeping. than if one is sort of, there's two ways to look at it that aren't mutually exclusive. It's like one could eat a certain way to ground oneself. I read somewhere that people who are vegetarian or vegan sometimes eat a cheeseburger to ground themselves when they're in a high state of consciousness. It's like do something really yuck to bring yourself down that the body isn't used to. It'll almost like make you physically sick, which then helps to reattach oneself to the body. So again, being in the body with healthy food or unhealthy food, or being in the body, like even right now, I want to make a note to get the book Practicing the Power of Now, because I used to do that, but now I feel like I need to reacquaint myself with that, because before I was practicing the power of now to have a clear mind and not have thought. But I feel like I could possibly, again, practice from this new perspective, which is having more access to insight, which can be, it's not really an intrusion, it's lovely, but it's also an intrusion in a way that, you know, here I am sitting talking about these insights when I could be out under the sun. One is more natural than the other, and that's being outside under the sun. Not that one can do that all the time, but there's no answer, and that's okay. But I also wrote down, related to this diet style thing, that if we don't do something different as boundless beings, like live a different lifestyle, have a different diet style, live in a different type of environment, then we get reassimilated. Because we eventually, that energy that would allow us to resonate higher than the consensus, gravity eventually brings us down, like gravity and consciousness. And it's heavy. It brings us back down to this heavy world of materiality. However you say that, I don't think I said it quite right. And so this assimilation process, interestingly enough, is being assimilated back to separation, bringing down consciousness back to perceiving from the level of separation. And it's painful because it's not that way. So we have to feel all this pain of separation in order to feel separation, because separation is pain. And being around that level of perception that sees from that worldview is painful, especially when one has been in a world where we were differentiated into oneness. So that's interesting how it's assimilation, which seems like joining, into separation, and differentiation, which seems like being different, into oneness. And but we haven't integrated the oneness, it seems. Well, I haven't, that's for sure. I'm sure there's a lot of beings out there who have integrated the oneness. And I don't know how, like I don't know if it's possible to integrate it around others who aren't ready to be one. Ready to be one. I remember making this thing ready to see, which is like an E that's red E, 2C, the number 2, and then the letter C. But this one's ready, or the E that's red, 2, the number 2, B1. So I should probably make that t-shirt. And then this is when things are like talking to myself about something, and then I have another insight, and then if I wanted to make a t-shirt like that, that would take hours and days. And almost everything I talk about, I could create something that would take hours and days, and this is how it expands exponentially, and I can't keep up. And I can't create any of it because I'm busy talking about everything that I see. And maybe I'm not supposed to create anything of it. Like, if someone wants to create some of it, go ahead. And I feel like I'm ready to be one, but I don't know where to do that. and there is nowhere. And that could be double meaning in that there is nowhere right now designed for that. And also there is no such thing as where and when. So in terms of linearity, but we have to create an artificial self-boundary. With the opaque self, it's no longer transparent, which is a term I learned from Thomas Metzinger, transparent self model, in his book The Ego Tunnel, that I didn't read, but I heard his talk. It's become opaque, we are aware of it. But again, it's opaque, but it's also not there. It's not real, so then that's where needing to create an artificial self-boundary comes in. Meaning creating an artificial self to give the appearance of self to other selves. Because if we don't, and this is where creating our artist self could come into play, like create a self based on our art, so then people know what we're about. Otherwise, we will be vulnerable to playing other self games. And that's probably why I have this intuition to like create my artist self, because then people will kind of know, oh, well, this person's an artist. They're not a person with a mental illness trying to be normal. But yeah, so I'm wondering if that's a good disguise. It's like, okay, I'm nobody. There's nothing there. But I'm an artist of some kind. Ooh. But I wrote that we have to create an artificial self-boundary, because otherwise it'll be given to us in the form of medication. And then that artificial self-boundary and that paradigm is trying to get back some semblance of our old self to again function in old ways in the old paradigm. But a new paradigm would be, oh my gosh, myself is going away. I need to reinvent myself in order to be able to continue to operate as a self, because there is no self there. And if I don't turn myself into some kind of artist, then I'm going to be turned into a mental patient. And yeah, I don't know if that's true, but here I am talking to myself and having insight at the same time and being like, okay, quickly do that or shit's going to hit the fan. So I might talk another video, I don't know.